Hello everybody, it is Elagatua, and I am back once again to cover a game. This was a game, and it was played on a map in the Smacky Cup number 4. This is round 5 of myself versus MWB. The map that we are going to be talking about today is called Second Step into Fog, and this is a pretty unique map, I think, compared to many of the other maps that I've played. And there's going to be a lot of stuff to break down as we go over the details. So let's just get right into it without anything further. So we've got a horizontal map. So not a diagonal map like many fog maps. So if you want to draw the middle of the map, you kind of just draw a straight line across there. But you can see that the properties are kind of aligned a little bit diagonally. And at first glance, you might think that it leads to a lot of kind of contested properties along the diagonal, like maybe it's kind of split, down the middle this way, where there's a lot of fighting over each of these properties. But that ends up not being the case. And we'll go into that a little more later on. But first, let's look at our bases and kind of break down our fronts here. So we've got our two bases up here that you start out with. And then we've got a neutral base that is a little bit more far forward, but also has this awkward C tile set that is blocking direct access to the center of the map. So if we look at our side bases here, the side bases have a lot of flexibility in the terrain around them to be able to get to other parts of the map. So if you look at like this base, you've got some roads going this way, but then you can kind of break into the center of the map pretty quickly. But if you want to go towards the edges, you've got this full road pathway that's going to take you all the way over towards the side. And so recons are going to be able to get out towards that right side very easily. But also, getting to the center is not particularly horrible either. I mean, this is just one forest that is leading into the center of the map. So even tanks and artillery from this base are not going to be hindered too much. Looking at the other base over here, we've got this river that's blocking a direct route towards the center of the map. So you have to at least go through some forests to get anywhere. But if you're sending vehicles down, you only have one forest separating you from the center. And then similarly, you also have this big road that kind of loops around here, but is going to make for very fast traveling for your recons if they want to get towards the center of the map. As for the center base, so obviously you're not going to be able to get across these C tiles here, and this center base is really what is going to determine a lot of the flow of the game, because you have an infantry reinforced path that kind of goes across this mountain, right? Where infantry can kind of go here and then down into the center of the map very quickly. But you are strongly incentivized to send your vehicles this way, because the vehicles can come from here and enter into the center of the map, just crossing over that single forest, and that's going to be the fastest reinforce you have towards the center. It's even faster than from this base by a couple of tiles. So you have some flexibility from this base to be able to send stuff very quickly towards the center of the map. One important thing to note about the center base, though, is because this mountain is blocking vehicles from coming this way. If you can send vehicles like up and around, but it's really kind of out of the way. And additionally, if you're sending like a tank this way, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you're losing a square of movement because of that second forest. So you're really incentivized to send your vehicles this way. And because of that, you kind of have two vehicle bases on this side here that are pushing in this direction. And this is kind of your sole potential vehicle base for this whole other side of the map. So this creates kind of a strong side, weak side dynamic where this side ends up being kind of the strong side by default, because that's where the vehicles can most efficiently reinforce. And likewise, this side kind of becomes a strong side as well. And so keep that in mind. We'll put a pin in that thought, but that's going to become a very important point of consideration later on as we get to the contested cities. But there's a lot of other things to talk about as well. We have two airports, one on either side, and they're very far kind of out there. And so with the two airports, you definitely have to be concerned about copters. And this is a map where you may see some copters, but you're definitely not going to see like copters from, you know, both of these airports at the same time. There's just not enough income for something crazy like that. And the reinforced distance from the bases somewhat disincentivizes really heavy airplay as well, because as we'll see, your reinforced distance to the center of the map from each of the bases is actually relatively low. So if you end up on a front missing anti-airs, it's pretty fast for you to end up just building them and getting them to the front. And so your timing window to exploit that, if you're the one with a lot of copters, is going to be somewhat limited. That being said, it does allow for very quick, very quick kind of emergency defense for one of your fronts. So if you end up finding that you're like ending up really under reinforced on your weak side, for example, like down here or over here, then you can start building from this airport and start to build up a lot of quick strength to try and reinforce if you find that you're kind of weaker than you expected on that side. Along with our airports, we do have a port kind of amusingly parked here in the center of the map. I guess you could build a battleship if you wanted, and it would be on the port, which is a thing that you can do if you really want. I don't think there's any way that any other naval unit other than a battleship could ever be built. And I don't know, it seems likely to not be a thing. If you're building battleships, you're probably already winning your game. So port, not going to be super relevant. Let's look at these comm towers. So we got a comm tower here and a comm tower here, and they're actually somewhat far forward given the center line of the map, which is here. So they're not super safe necessarily. That being said, I don't think you can realistically ever get the opponent's comm tower. That's not really a thing. I think the best you could possibly do is deny it. And it is something that, could be attempted as kind of a cheese play, because you do have these forests here on the other side. And so in theory, if you rushed an artillery over to these woods tiles and got it kind of set up there before your opponent tries to cap this comm tower, it could be very, very difficult for your opponent to end up locking that comm tower down. So that is an offensive option, but there is a very kind of strict timing window for that, because if your artillery gets there and the comm tower is already taken, well, then it's a defensive artillery more than an offensive one. which can also be okay, but it's something that's got to be incorporated as part of your overall strategy if you're going to go for that. It kind of has to be like, I'm going to first unit artillery and rush it to that square and hope that my opponent doesn't go for the comm tower before I can get set up. Let us look at some of the terrain of this map, because I think this is where things start to get complicated, I guess. And the terrain, I think, more than anything else, really defines the character of this map. So on the sides, we have a lot of really weak terrain, right? Like the roads and things like that. But let's just take a minute and look at the center area. The center area is wild. We've got mountains here. They kind of overlook the entire center area. And then there is just an absolute mass of trees. Some people might call it a forest. And this is all around these center two properties. This is an area of the map where if you control the center of the map, it is very, very difficult for you to be dislodged from the center, simply because of the amount of forests. If you're able to knock your opponent all the way out of this square, the sheer amount of unit count that they are going to need to put stuff next to forests and then clear stuff out of the forest. And by the way, if you're trying to clear something out of here, unless it's like an infantry in the forest and you've got an anti-air, you're probably going to need 2 units to attack whatever's here. So that means you need 1 unit for vision, and then you need, like 2 units here. But then if you've got a unit here, then you also need to see into this forest to make sure there's not something there either. So you can see how this gets progressively more and more difficult if you ever lose control of the middle. So middle control ends up being incredibly important on this map, simply due to the amount of forests there, and it's kind of a lose condition for the map, because if you just get cleaned out of there, then you're kind of locked out for potentially a very long time, and it becomes very, very difficult to ever gain that back. Additionally, there's a lot of forests everywhere on the map, to be honest. There's pretty good defensive forests here. There's these guys on the side. And a Recon actually can get into this forest in 2 moves, which is pretty wild. If you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So keep that in mind. So a Recon from this base can get here in 2 moves. And likewise from here. So recons, or early recons from this base, are definitely quite good, and it's getting to this tile is very safe, because once that recon is in those forests, it's going to be pretty hard to remove that. It's very unlikely that you can one-shot a recon, and so that means if it's in the forest, then you're going to have to control basically all 3 of these tiles in order to clear the recon out. So that is something to keep in mind. That being said, recons for vision maybe not as important on this map than they would be on other maps, because look at all these mountains. There are mountains in the center of the map. There's mountains in the back of the map. There's mountains in the middle of the map. There's mountains all over the place in this map. And so you can pretty much just have infantry after the cap phase hang out on the map, or hang out on the mountains, and you're going to be able to see a pretty substantial amount of the map purely just through mountain vision. So recons on this map are more of a aggression unit than they are for vision, just because there are a lot of other vision options available to you. And having control of your mountains is very important because of all the forests that they can see into. For example, this mountain can see anything that goes into this forest. This mountain, very important to see a lot of the movement around the center of the map, and so on and so forth. So that is something to keep in mind. It reminds me of Marengo a little bit, where there's just a lot of mountains that you're going to end up having infantry on in the mid game that are going to give you a pretty good idea of what's going on the map. So I think we're now to the point where we can talk about the contested properties. And so again, if I'm going to draw this line through the center of the map, it should be very clear, maybe even to newer players, where the most contested part of the map is going to be. And I'll give you, as wise people say, 3 guesses and the first 2 don't count. So I hope you said the middle. That is the most contested part of the map. Those 2 properties are going to be very difficult to capture, generally speaking, and they should be very hard to flip as well once they are captured. These are the #1 contested properties on the map. That being said, there are some other contestable properties. So remember we said that this base here, you're incentivized to send your vehicles this way because this is the fastest reinforced path. And consequently, this block of cities here is further back on the strong side of the opponent. And so it creates a dynamic where early on in the game, these properties are going to be easier to capture for the top side player because they are closer to the bases. And so the infantry can get there faster and kind of lock them down. However, after the cap phase, then this side becomes the strong side because there's just more vehicles that can pop out on this side. And so it's going to put pressure on these cities. At least that's kind of the natural dynamic of the map. And so the bottom player is going to be pushing forward into further kind of across the center of the map because they're able to generate more vehicles. And the same is true on the other side as well, where this side is going to have, the bottom player is going to have access to these cities earlier on. And so really the challenge is, as the bottom player, you really kind of want to lock these down as quickly as possible, because if you end up in a situation where for whatever reason they get denied until the mid game, the pressure becomes very high or the difficulty becomes very high in being able to complete those caps, because even though they're on your side of the map, you're going to be getting a lot of pressure from all the vehicles coming across. So really what it comes down to on this map at a very high level is you need to make sure your opponent doesn't get the center. You want to try and lock down these properties on your side very early on. And then in the mid game, you want to kind of fight for the center, but also put pressure on the properties on your opponent's weak side and use that kind of 2-to-1 base advantage to build up a strong enough push to be able to either flip those properties or win a fight over there, take favorable trades and things like that. However, that is easier said than done, and the reason why is largely due to some math. So if you'll bear with me for a moment, there's kind of a weird quirk of this math that's going to, or of this map that's going to require us to do some counting. And so first we're going to look at this base, and we're going to look at these set of properties here, and we're just going to count, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So both of these 2 properties are within 2 tank moves of this base. And for these 2 properties, it's actually the same. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so all of these are always going to be within 2 tank moves of this base, and likewise for the other side. And what this means is that other than these like middle two properties, it's kind of hard to flip these for the player on that's attacking them on the strong side. It's just really hard to flip properties with all this defensive terrain and also being 2 tank moves away from the base. And this really incentivizes defensive play, because once, let's say that the weak side player is able to get all 4 of these cities, look at all these defensive options. You can have an artillery here, behind the forest, locking down both of these cities. Like, there's no way you can ever clear an artillery here. Like, artillery here blocked by the mountain. There's no easy access on this side, and you've got a forest in front of it, and then a mountain even blocking the forest as well. Like, it's totally untouchable. And over here, these 2 are also, by the way, 1 copter move away from the airport. Now, the copter can't get onto the city, but the copters don't care about getting on the city. The copters can make it to these roads and assist with clearing anything that ends up on the city, like they're trying to capture it, like infantry from the top player. So there are a lot of reinforcement reasons and counting reasons why these cities end up being very, very challenging to lose if you manage to secure them in the early game. Add on top of that all these mountains providing a tremendous amount of vision into the area needed to be able to attack into these cities. So it's very difficult to get the element of surprise in attacking those theoretically contested properties. So we kind of tying it all back to what are the contested properties on this map. In my opinion, it's really only the 2 center properties. Maybe you can argue that the comm tower is deniable, so it's contested in that sense. Maybe you can think about like denying these cities with like some really strong early pressure if you want to go that route. But beyond that, like there's really, it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to flip any other cities on your opponent's side of the map unless there's a real kind of trade going on where you kind of send everything to one side and your opponent sends everything to the other side, and you kind of handshake and kind of flip the fronts like that. So just this map strongly favors defensive play, and once you get your cities, it's going to be pretty easy to hang on to them, and it's going to be pretty challenging for your opponent to be able to steal them away from you. One last thing I'll say about the kind of layout of the map and how it affects the cities is that this map is very wide. And there are a lot of kind of different objectives, right? Like you got kind of this area, like this, you can think of it as like a column, a column, a column, a column, and a column. So there's like kind of 5 different columns that there can be engagements on. This is why center control is so incredibly important, because if you end up controlling the center, you do have the ability to kind of switch more easily between the columns, and you can say, okay, my opponent is strong here, so I can either choose to reinforce there with my center control or not, or I can try to flip the other side. And so center control becomes incredibly important because of the width of the map. It's very difficult to defend all 5 columns at the same time. You kind of have to choose where you think your opponent is going to be pushing and reinforce to that section of the map. And that's kind of where the play of the map comes from. The reinforcements favor defense, so the only way you're going to be able to overcome that is by maneuvering your force into a place that your opponent is unprepared to defend, and the easiest way to do that is with kind of maneuverability, controlling the center, forcing your opponent to commit to defending one or two of these columns, and then you're like, okay, well, if you're going to defend those columns, then I'm just going to put massive pressure on other side of the map. And if you do that, even if maybe properties are a little bit further back, if you're fighting with the majority of your army against like a weak side, reinforcement, you can kind of wipe out the defenses there and force a lot of challenges for the opponent to hang on to that side, even if it's like pretty close to the reinforcing bases. You can really overwhelm the sides if you're able to gain control of the center like that, and kind of force a lot of your opponent's force to be defending a side of the map that is not being attacked, and then they're kind of stuck over there, and you attack the other part, right? So that's kind of classic tactics, and defeat in detail, I think, is the technical term for that kind of strategy. So yeah, I think that covers a lot of the map architecture. Why don't we talk about COs for this match? We've been talking for 25 minutes, and I forgot to even start the replay for having things to watch as I explain all the concepts. So I apologize for that. Hope you were entertained by this blank board and my crazy drawings. So let's talk about COs. This is a tier 3 matchup, but this is a tier 3 matchup with Kindle banned. So we're watching a test game, I believe, between Rip and Humita, and Rip is playing as Kindle, but that was not an option for any of us. So when you're looking at tier 3 on a normal 3-base map, so not a base light, generally you're going to be looking between either Lash, Drake, or Andy. Those are going to be the 3 picks that stand out. So let's take a look a little bit more about those COs. So for Lash, the biggest argument in favor of Lash is the terrain. There's a ton of high defense terrain all through this center area. There's lots of mountains, there's lots of forests, and there's lots of cities. So all those things are very good for Lash. That being said, Lash's powers are pretty awful. Although, interestingly enough, on this map, the thing that keeps you out of the center more than anything else is forests and not physical distance. So I think Lash's CO power, I think it's terrain tactics, though the one that never ever gets used, I think is actually much better on this map than it would be on virtually any other map. That doesn't necessarily mean it's good. It just means that it's better than being garbage tier. So that could be kind of a thing that maybe there could be opportunities for, because people don't ever expect that CO power to pop up. Another thing in favor of Lash is that we talked about this being a very defensive map due to the reinforcements, and Lash's artillery in forests one-shot infantry on plains or on roads. So it's very important, and there's lots of really good locations for artillery to go. So that's a very good thing for Lash. Whoa, jump scare. And obviously the mountains as well, especially like this mountain and this mountain like next to the city. This is like a very good place for Lash to be able to control. It's very difficult, like if Lash is the top player, it's very difficult to put pressure on these two cities, because if Lash is just controlling this mountain, whatever ends up on this city, which is like kind of the more exposed city, it's actually, as the bottom player, you don't really want to be putting infantry onto that tile and just get it smacked by a plus 40% bonus attack infantry from Lash. So the terrain is very, very good for Lash. And if you're going to be playing Lash, then you're really, you want to win the middle. The middle has, I mean, this whole area is just incredibly good for brawling as Lash. There's only 2 tiles that you really just kind of want to stay off of, but any other tile is going to give you pretty substantial attack bonuses that are, you know, they do matter quite a lot if you're fighting around the center. And so Lash's day-to-day is going to be really, really meaningful, and that is an argument to play as her. That being said, the argument for Drake is global damage goes burr. This is a kind of defensive map, or it can end up being a little bit stally. It can also end up being a little bit brawly depending on how you play it. But despite there being 2 airports, I don't actually think that air units are like incredibly good on this map. So your Drake copters hitting people with paper mache bullets, it's not going to impact you as much because you can really just focus on your vehicles and your infantry, and that's still fine. So Drake's always going to be good purely for that reason. And then lastly, you've got Andy. If you're playing as Andy, you're kind of hoping to take advantage of the copters because you want to fight copters against copters, and then that's going to give you a lot of value out of your hyper repair. And any sort of like tank brawling and things like that, the more brawly it gets, then the more value you could end up getting from that superpower. Andy's kind of the safe pick, I think. There's nothing wrong with Andy, and if Drake is good, Andy kind of becomes good as well because Andy, obviously the powers have some counterplay against Drake as well. So I really think you can make an argument for any of those 3 COs. I think it's kind of a soft triangle, to be honest. I think that Lash is quite good against Andy. I think that Andy is quite good against Drake, and I think Drake is really good against Lash. So, buyer or player beware, I suppose. There's not really one clear option. You're just hoping you win the triangle and outpick your opponent by guessing right, I guess, or just pick the one that's more comfortable for your play style. I do think that Lash is maybe a little bit more tricky to play than the other COs. So if you're not really confident, I mean, I think if you're not really confident, you should probably just pick Drake because Drake global damage ends up being pretty simple. So it's kind of hard to go wrong if you're not really sure with that. And yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. So with that being said, I think we've covered almost everything that we can cover with this map. Let us switch over to the game and we'll talk about that. All right, we're into the game now and we can look at the COs, and I have gone with Lash. I think that Lash is pretty good, and I was hoping for an Andy pick from my opponent. I was very nervous about Drake. I just think Lash against global damage is really, really tough because I do think it is very difficult for Lash to end up with like an income lead on this map. And so if Drake kind of stalls out the game at even income, then it's kind of hard for Lash to stick around. Eventually the CO powers end up grinding her down. So I was hoping to get an Andy pick out of my opponent, and that is what I got. And so one of the nice things about Lash is she's got that day-to-day bonus, and especially the day-to-day bonus on the cities is pretty substantial. And so because of that, when you think of like who is the aggressor CO and who's the defender, generally Lash is going to be your aggressor CO for the same reason that Kindle ends up being an aggressor's CO, harassing Lash makes you very vulnerable because any sort of counterattack to your harass is going to generally kill units in one hit. So if you've got a recon that's attacking infantry on a city, and then there's a tank there to counterattack it, then that recon is going to get one shot for sure, and it's going to end up being a really bad trade. So that can be very good for your metagame as Lash, because what I'm planning to do here is I'm actually going to be going for a T-copter build. We didn't talk about any of the opener meta at all, but I'm going to start talking about it now. I think the opener meta on this map, just as I think the tier 3 COs are kind of rock, paper, scissors, the opener meta on this map is also extremely heavy on the rock, paper, scissors element, much more so than other maps. And we kind of touched on the reasons for this in the map breakdown. But the combination of all of these cities being within 2 tank moves of a base, the strength of defensive play, and all like the most contested cities kind of being in a single place, if you're able to get your cities very early on, the ones that are kind of yours, these, the cities in here for me, if you're able to get those, then especially as Lash, they're likely just going to remain mine for the rest of the game, and I can kind of focus on the middle, and it simplifies the game plan. That being said, the recon harass on the sides, well, especially, so this side in particular, is extremely strong because you can get that recon in 2 moves to this forest and kind of safely see what's going on both of these cities. So day 3 recon is very good, especially if you want to try and lock out your opponent from these cities, knowing that if you don't lock your opponent out of those cities very early on, you're likely never going to have the opportunity to do that. So day 3 recon becomes good, but anytime that day 3 recon is good, day 5 tank is also going to be good because it's just kind of the meta counter to day 3 recon. So you can do day 5 tank from this base, and then if day 3 recon shows up here on these cities, and you've got a tank here ready to counterattack, then you're just going to be smashing whatever recon shows up in one hit. And then so day 5 tank is good, day 3 recon is good, and also T-copter is good because if you get to these cities very, very quickly, then you're able to be faster than a lot of harass builds. Basically, a T-copter build ends up capturing these 2 cities before a day 4 recon build can actually harass them. So you have this really kind of hard rock, paper, scissors in the opening. You have day 3 recon is really good against T-copter. You have T-copter is good against basically literally anything other than day 3 recon. And then you have day 5 tank, which is really, really good against day 3 recon. But because the distance to the center of the map is so small, if you end up losing the rock, paper, scissors, it kind of becomes really catastrophic. Because if you get locked out of these cities that are kind of belonging to you but are contestable, and then you don't manage the same for your opponent, then your opponent can kind of sit on denying these cities and play really far back on the other side, and then you're kind of stuck in an income deficit, and there's not really a whole lot that you're going to be able to do to turn that around. So to me, because those 3 builds counter each other so hard, it really amplifies the rock, paper, scissors of this match. And then because the map is so defensive, once you get to the mid game, any player who wins the rock, paper, scissors is likely to be able to kind of cement whatever advantage they get in the early game. And so I don't really love that combination of factors. And I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad map. I just think that I, as a personal preference, I don't love maps that kind of accentuate the importance of winning the early rock, paper, scissors, because it really is a lot about kind of meta and hope I blindly choose the right thing, and then the result of that can potentially be enough to determine the course of potentially even the rest of the game if the players are skilled enough that you're playing it. So anyway, that tangent aside, I'm going to be going for a T-copter opening, and my hope is that basically because I'm playing Lash punishes harass if Lash has tanks. So I'm just hoping that my opponent will not have the guts to go day 3 Recon into Lash because I am the aggressor CO. So I'm hoping my opponent will play more defensive, will play more of a safe build, and I'm going to play a greed build. But I know that if I run into a day 3 Recon, it's going to be horrifically bad for me because that's just how the map works. That being said, if I don't run into a day 3 Recon, it's going to be incredibly good for me because I can kind of play defensive around these cities and really just focus everything on the middle, and then Lash's day-to-day power is really going to help me. Like if we end up in like a giant mid fight for the entire mid game, then that's going to kind of favor me because I'm going to be fighting with substantial attack bonuses for all my units. So that's the theory behind the build. Let's see how it goes. The early T-copter, I get the double boost here. And so now I'm set up to get both of these cities starting next turn. And the only way that any of those caps can get interrupted is if a day 3 Recon is built from this base. Everything else is relatively safe though. I'm not following up with a Recon the turn after, even though I could. We're just going to be going for full economy and trying to make sure we get all of our captured or our contested properties as quickly as possible, and then we'll worry about denying the center later on. One other reason that this T-copter is pretty good for Lash is that mechs are quite good on this map because of the amount of forests and because of the amount of forests that are near to contested cities. And so if we end up in a big fight in the mid game around here, having this T-copter around to be able to ferry a bunch of mechs like onto this mountain or into these cities is going to be very cost effective in my favor. And it's going to hopefully allow me to get more stuff that kills tanks and kills vehicles into the center more cost efficiently. So there's a lot of like mid game synergy with the T-copter that I'm hoping to get some value out of later on, as long as I don't run into the day 3 Recon. So next, we go in for the caps. We don't need to get a boosty on this infantry, because we can get a boosty. So the idea is to send this guy here. This guy is actually going to skip over the city to make sure that we can kind of lock down the center, and then the infantry from this base will get boosted to here and then go to this city. And so if everything goes well, you'll kind of see how this plays out. But basically, this guy goes here, but then this guy goes here, and then this Recon is going to give vision. And basically, I'm going to skip these two guys ahead to get these two cities pretty quickly as well, because this guy will go here next turn, and then the following turn I'll actually skip ahead to this one, because this guy will end up just capping this one instead, and I'll it reduces my risk of getting harassed on this side, just getting those properties quickly, and the Recon is timed so that I'm going to get vision to make sure that I don't get trapped by an opposing Recon over on this side. And we're just trying to again get to all of our cities very quickly within reason, so that we can focus on kind of defense and the middle fight, because that is what plays to our CO strengths, and that's just how the map is laid out. And I've got an artillery as well. So artillery, very, very good for fighting in the middle. You can get an artillery here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you get an artillery here and you cover both of those cities. And so that's going to make it extremely difficult for Andy to make any progress on any of the center cities. So it's basically any other opening other than day 3 recon, we're going to be in really good shape, because we're set up for that center fight to be really strong for us. But we start to see trouble immediately, and we see a recon there. So this is pretty crazy, actually. This is a day 4 recon from this base. So this is actually 2 moves. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But in order to attack this infantry, he needed to have vision provided by this infantry. So him having this infantry here already means that this infantry is kind of being pulled off caps, because you can see, like my infantry is not even close to being able to get down there. So that is something. And we see the day 3 recon on this side as well. So this is the basically I chose the build hoping that my opponent doesn't go the one thing that hard counters the build, and my opponent went the one thing that hard counters the build. So at this point, I kind of made peace with my tournament run. And I was like, well, we're probably just not going to win this game. And this is pretty crazy, actually. So there's 2nd infantry shows up here to fully kill this guy. It's pretty wild. So for what it's worth, this is a pretty uneconomical build from my opponent. That being said, it ends up working really, really well. And it's kind of, it's incredibly catastrophic for me, because this infantry now is in position just to pivot to the center. And there's absolutely nothing I can do to stop this this cap from happening next turn. I'm sure I could T-copter the infantry over here, do something ridiculous like that. But obviously, any attempt to do that is going to be seen by the recon, so it's not going to have a prayer of working. And so I'm not only am I getting my build card countered, I'm not going to be able to capture this city. I've lost an infantry over here, which means I'm not getting either of these 2 cities. And remember, this guy is supposed to get this city. He's not even going to be following up towards these. So now these cities are getting delayed. I can't contest the middle anymore. So I'm losing that, and he's going to get these cities in the center that are the most highly contested cities on the map. And I've got a T-copter and an artillery. There's no tank on the way. There's nothing that I can do to fight against this recon. There's nothing I do to fight against this recon. It's hard to understate how catastrophic this situation is for me, basically as a result of the rock, paper, scissors. And that's just how it is, right? That's how this map is. You have to choose one of the 3 builds to go, and if I'd chosen the tank build instead, then I'd be picking off a recon for free. But that's not the world that we lived in. So let's finish up this turn. So there are it's hard to call it silver linings, but there are some things that we do need to discuss. So first of all, there are 2 infantry that showed up over here, which means basically those were kind of the first couple of infantry that were supposed to capture some of these properties. So those guys are up here fighting me. So for what it's worth, my opener is going to be more economically efficient than my opponent, at least for now. Additionally, I am going to be able to get this city, even with the recon arrest. So that is kind of the plus side of the Recon harass. So where's that Recon? He's here. So where can this Recon go? So, and I guess another nice thing. So this Recon, even though this infantry died, actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah. So this Recon actually can't shift over here to assist with the defense or with the harass on that side. Instead, it's likely going to shift to the middle just to protect this infantry that's going to cap this city. So I'm likely at least not to lose a second infantry. I can just kind of pull this guy off and send him into the forest. But I mean, the economic... Sure, Andy has done economic damage to himself by pulling his infantry off. But Andy is also doing a tremendous amount of economic damage to me. And it's absolutely worth it to do an aggressive play like this if it works out as well as it has here. So, yeah. Kind of a rough one for me, and I wasn't really sure. I mean, when things like this happen, in order to try and recover from this, you just really need to take it one turn at a time and just focus on what are you doing on the next turn, because it's very easy to get on tilt and just think like, oh, I lost the rock paper scissors. It's like my opponent's so lucky that he did like the one build that counters exactly what I did. I'm just going to resign day 6 to throw up my hands and, show everybody how bad of a map this is. That line of thinking, I mean, maybe it feels like emotionally justified, and you could even be right. Maybe the map does suck or whatever, but that doesn't help you win. And so it is fog, and this isn't the first time that I've had an opener go really, really badly. So I'm going to try my best to play out the rest of the game and see if there's some way that I can kind of turn it around in a longer game, and hope my opponent maybe make some mistakes that allow me to equalize things and get an opening. Because oftentimes fog is just about who makes the last biggest mistake, and it's still very early, so I'm going to just do my best to play my way one turn at a time and see where we get, because it's a tournament game, right? Like this is the quarterfinals, so if it does me no good to kind of quit on the game after day 6, just because, well, I mean, merely because I am horribly behind after day 6 in the most catastrophic way possible. I'm going to at least do my best for the rest of the game. So with that being said, let's move on to this next turn here. So I finished this cap, and we send this guy into the forest. I'm not even going to try and pretend like I've got a tank, because the only way that I can have infantry capping both of these cities is with a T-copter opener. So I'm not going to be fooling my opponent with the threat of tanks showing up. Sometimes bluffing is good, but I'm not in the mood to bluff here. And we're just going to continue with the original plan for the captures. So we see that we're not getting blocked here, so we're going to set up for the skip ahead here to make sure we get both of those cities. And this is interesting. So I'm going to be shifting the artillery over to this side. This is not efficient movement. You don't really want to be doing this. I don't really want to be doing this. However, my opponent does have a recon here, and there's an infantry here. And if my opponent gets really, really crazy, maybe my opponent goes and hits this infantry, in which case I'll get a free shot with the artillery onto the recon. Just going to try and give my opponent a chance to throw, but I think it's pretty unlikely. I think it's much more likely that the recon will go over to this square instead, because that is actually going to allow my opponent to see what I build out of my base, which is insanely strong, by the way. So I know that that's like very likely to be what my opponent's going to do. So I'm actually, like, we haven't gotten to the deploys yet, but when I'm thinking about what am I going to deploy, I really don't want to deploy a tank from this base because I know it's really likely that my opponent can see or will be able to see what I end up building. Because I mean the Recon's here now, but next turn it's likely going to be here. So, that's the most likely situation. And then I need to get these cities. So I'm losing mid. There's nothing I can do about it. I have no way to contest mid. I can't pretend like I can contest mid. There's going to be Recon seeing everything. I've got no tricks that I can do. So the next objective for me is just to, like, okay, we still got to get these cities. And the best way for us to get these cities is we need to get our artillery over here somewhere to kind of defend this area so that we can capture the city safely. And we also want to get a mech to try and basically get some power on the map as quickly as possible and to use the synergy with the T-copter. And so the mech is going to just come to this forest, and then that's going to defend anything that tries to harass me capturing these 2 tiles. Additionally, mechs and artillery are amazing. They have amazing synergy because they both can kind of stay very far back and they support each other. So generally, your opponent is not going to have enough to dive into your backlines and hit both the mech and the artillery, especially in the early game. It's pretty unlikely that that can happen. And so they're cheap, but they defend each other well, and they can stay back. And there's good synergy with the T-copter. So this is my best option. So I'm going to instead be going for a lot of recons on this side. This uses all my money, and this simultaneously gives me the ability to maybe put some pressure on over here. Because now I'm like, okay, I got harassed over here, but maybe I can do some counter harass on this side to get some counter damage. Because I know that my opponent is really heavily invested into vehicles with the day 3, day 4 recon build. So it's very unlikely that there's going to be any vehicles over here to defend, so maybe I can still get there in time to be able to make something happen and try to equalize that. So, yeah. All these things, it's kind of like the best I can muster with the situation that I'm in. We got the mech for defense with the T-copter. We've got a recon built here, which doesn't give away too much information about what I'm doing because it's not a tank, and I know my opponent's going to be able to see this recon most likely. And then I've got 3 recons over here, and I've got the opportunity potentially for some offensive play on this side. So that's what I'm thinking for this turn. I reserve the right to change my plan at any time, but that's just where we're going. Again, we're really far behind, but we're just going to try and take this one turn at a time and do our best to get what we can out of the situation. So this guy gets pinged by the recon. I don't really care about this one way or the other. Like, it's fine, I guess. It's going to kind of deny me like 1,000 income because it's going to repair the infantry, and then, I mean, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. As long as the infantry doesn't die, it's okay. Okay, we don't see anything else, so it's pretty much what we expected, but we know that our opponent almost certainly is just going to be eating the middle now that that recon can see everything. So we're just going to focus on our plan. So the first thing we do, so we get our recon down here, and we see that both of these cities are getting capped already. So already, these cities are capped. There's a good chance that both of these cities are capped or going to be capped. I don't have any offensive potential for these cities either. So this is more bad on top of the bad already. Like, my plan was, okay, we're going to maybe harass, put some pressure on these cities. Yeah, it's not happening. He's going to get those cities for free. He can't do anything about it. So we're going to reevaluate in a second. But for now, we just go and we cap our stuff. Get our comm tower. And we're just going to show them the mech. We're going to show them the mech, and we're going to be like, don't hit him. Don't hit him. Or else I'll hit you with my imaginary copter that I built on this city last turn. It is actually, this mech is very safe. It's very hard to get anything through. You need a lot of units to be able to clear off this this infantry here, and these guys are kind of forming a wall anyway. So it's one of those rare situations. Like, I would not show this mech. You want mechs to be surprises if you can, right? But I would not show this mech if I was in any kind of a better situation. But my board situation is so bad that I just have to like try and scare him off from continuing to harass this other infantry. So there he goes, and it is what it is. So now, again, we don't want to build tanks from this base because we know that very likely, especially with our vision now, like there's almost certainly a recon here, right? Like that's, I mean, if I was in my opponent's situation, that's what I would do. So we're denying information by building an infantry. We build the tank here instead, and we're just going to be set up that we've got to secure our properties here before it's too late, before there's too many vehicles on the board. We're going to lose the middle. Like, it sucks. It's the most contested properties on the board. We're going to be down on income going into the mid game. There's nothing we can do about it. The only way that we can potentially have a chance to turn this game around is just to make sure that we get our properties here and then try to make something happen from there, playing from a little bit behind. This is the best we can do. So fortunately, we do see the recon back off, so I am going to be able to get this city. And we see this guy kind of posture aggressively. And this actually makes me quite happy that I did this aggressive capture play, because I'm basically getting this city a few turns earlier than I would normally get it because I skipped over from this city. And this is something I've talked about in my other videos. Doing this play here where you kind of give up the capture on this city to go to another city and then follow it up with a second cap here, it doesn't actually cost you income. It just defers 1k income by 1 turn. So as long as that deferred income doesn't cost you any vehicle buys or anything like that, it's advantageous to do that because I am going to get that contested property earlier than I would otherwise, and that gives less of a window of opportunity for my opponent to put pressure on that city because I've got it already now. So at least that part's working out pretty well. And now I shift this guy over. I actually thought about maybe at this point, like I've got this artillery over here. I could try to get this artillery into the forest and try to lock the comm tower, but if I do that, I'm gonna have to basically sack this infantry, and I'm doing this into a bunch of recons that I know exist. So I end up just accepting it and giving up on any sort of crazy play. And we do move this infantry in, and we see that the city's already been taken, which is not surprising at all. And then we move in here as well, and we see that this city is going to be taken. There's nothing we could have ever done about any of this. So we are losing the middle for free, and there's just nothing we can do about it. And like I said, this is the effect of the rock, paper, scissors. I lost the 2 most contested properties on the map because I lost the rock, paper, scissors, and there's just nothing. There's no recovery that I could have done that could have prevented that from happening. It was just it was inevitable based on how things worked out. That being said, my new plan is we're going to go all in on the middle. So it seems like we're very strong here now. So we've got the mech, we've got the artillery, we've got both of these cities now, so we don't really need to stick around here. now we're kind of our gravity is going to shift towards here, and there's no real opportunities to pressure these cities either. I mean, I could, send the Recon in blind, but by this point, it's entirely possible for there to be a tank waiting for me on this side. And, I see 4 infantry. I've got 3 infantry. So the odds of me being able to, win the infantry fight over here and flip any of these properties before, reinforcements come from this base or this airport, totally unrealistic. So it's just not going to happen. So my next best thing is, okay, we're just going to give up on any offensive threat here, and we're just going to send everything mid, and we can kind of consolidate our vehicles from both sides on the middle and hope that we get something done with this attack. So now we're starting to take control of the center, and we see the Recon is just kind of hanging out here, which is fine. This is going to let us build a wall. And again, this is not a conventional play that I do. The whole point of having an early artillery is that you don't show it to your opponent, but I am so far behind that I have very little choice. I've just got to dissuade my opponent from harassing either of these 2 cities. And fortunately, this position is actually pretty strong. So anything that comes on this city, the mech is able to counter that. This tank is supporting everything as well. And the artillery, the artillery is going to at least prevent this this Recon from sticking around. So you can't stay in this forest, and so I think there's a good chance that I'm at least going to be able to get my cities. Obviously, it's very slow. My opponent already has both of these cities, and I'm just going to be able to capture the first one, hopefully, next turn. And obviously, if the Recon does harass in, I do have the tank. So the tank is defending this cap. So it is what it is. One other thing that's kind of weird. So this Recon has vision of the entry point to the center woods, but doesn't have entry. It doesn't have vision of the entry to this tile. So my Recon kind of came in here and then went through the woods. So my opponent doesn't actually know that I've got the Recon in there. Although my opponent probably ought to have an idea, because my opponent saw me build the Recon. Most likely, we don't know that for sure, right? But if the Recon's here, the Recon probably used to be there, right? So very, very likely that my opponent saw the Recon, and so you would expect a 2-move Recon to be in this vicinity somewhere. And then this guy is just going to shift over here, and he's going to ultimately, we're all inning mid, and big boy, this is how desperate we are. We're going medium tank. This is, it's not the play I drew up in the move planner going into the game, but the situation is desperate enough that I'm hoping that my opponent will not see this coming. And I'm just going to hope that I can force a fight in mid, and my opponent will defend it with tanks, and then at the right time, my medium tank will show up and blow up a tank, and I'll be able to win the mid fight off the back of this. For what it's worth, medium tanks better than usual on this map, especially from the weak side base. This is something that you see on Marengo, another map as well, where the weak side base, the reinforcement to the fighting area is pretty short, even for a unit that can only move 5 squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you're like 3 turns to the center, and all of this stuff is like within 2-turn reinforcement from the medium tank. So it's going to be able to support a lot of the stuff that I'm moving towards the center. But this is kind of my ace in the hole, right? Like I'm doing something unexpected because I'm really far behind and I need to make something happen in order to equalize this game. And if I don't, then I'm just going to lose. So you might as well go for something, because, I mean, if things just kind of stabilize the way they are, then I'm going to be behind 2K income and the map's going to, just kind of brawl out, and then I'm going to lose. So this is what I'm going for. Boink. So this is a really, really, really big mistake by my opponent. I'm not sure what exactly the thinking was. I'm guessing that my opponent didn't realize that something could be in here, because maybe my opponent thought that he could see it come in, but actually because I came through the forest, it's kind of there by surprise. And it's actually a catastrophic place for this Recon to be. I have no tanks that can fight, but actually lash Recons from here and here. I don't know what the roll is. I think it's guaranteed, actually. With the plus 20 damage from the forest and with the plus 10 damage from the plains, 2 lash Recons can kill this Andy Recon on the road, which is nuts. So Recon on Recon violence, rare to escalate to this level, but here we are. So that is a big deal, because as long as no tanks show up. Also, what? Anti-air just goes in vision, and then the Recon attacks an infantry, but I've already captured this city. I don't know if this was a roll or not. Let me find out if this was a roll. Okay, upon evaluation, it was a roll asterisk. Actually, this is a ghastly roll for my opponent. This is insanely lucky. I think I calculated it out. It's like 93% to kill. And the Recon low rolled. And even when the Recon low rolls, the infantry is still like 60% to kill. Or sorry, 80% to kill the infantry on the city. So the infantry surviving with 1 HP is just like ghastly luck for Andy. And I guess this anti-air had to come in to give vision so that the Recon could go in. So that's horribly unlucky for my opponent. So this turn has been basically a catastrophe for him. Now, I have no counterplay to this at all, but it is very good to know that that there is an anti-air over here. So that's like very important information, because that means there's not likely to be a whole lot over here, and it kind of reveals maybe a little bit of what our opponent is thinking, because our opponent maybe wants to push this side, and we're actually really well set up to defend against a push on this side, because we just invested like all of our money in a medium tank that's going to have the opportunity to like fight over here. So this actually could be very good for us. And the fact that we won that roll is really, really good for us, although we can't do anything to the Recon. And we see a T-copter show up as well. That's kind of good for us as well. Like this, we're seeing a lot of stuff that isn't just like units that can come to the middle. And dropping off something here, you would assume that it's a mech. But we don't care, even if it is a mech. Mech is not going to change anything. We've got too much stuff to be dissuaded by one mech. After all, look at all this stuff that's over here. This stuff is not going to help fight in the middle. All my stuff is coming to the middle. There's no way, knowing what I know, that I can be too weak to take the middle. Especially now that I'm going to get this Recon. We see the infantry back up here. I mean, I guess I could, go into this infantry on the mountain, and my Recon is spotted by this guy. But if I send this recon like onto the city, then I'm within 1 turn of the airport, and my recon could like go here, and then this guy could come and finish off the guy on the mountain. But then what, right? Like then I just probably lose this infantry in a trade, so it's like a 1-for-1, and I need this recon to be with my fight. I'm not actually going to be putting pressure on that side at all, because I'm all-inning mid, so I need to all-in mid. I can't get distracted by other crap. So anyway, so we start off and we just take off this recon, lash, strong CO. Get a little boosty. Take this other city that we need. Finally, we're trying to lock this down. And now we can start capping mid and try to equalize the income. So because that recon is dead now, I'm definitely very, very strong in the middle, and we can position artillery wherever we want. And we're going to do this to back up our capture, and anything that interrupts this capture will be going away. And additionally, anything that tries to, so for example, so that this mech, we know this mech is here, so it's technically, or we don't know it's a mech, but we're assuming it's a mech, right? Like that would be the obvious thing to be there. So even if this mech is here, mech comes in, like, you know, infantry goes here, mech goes here. I don't even think that kills the recon for what it's worth. But then the mech and the infantry both die next turn because I've got 3 recons there. I've got all my strength in the center. So this mech, I mean, the mech is safe, but the mech is also useless just because I've got more stuff. Got more stuff, and the terrain in the center, once you're in the trees, it's very hard to get you out of the trees. We've got the lash infestation, and the exterminator is billing rates are too high for Andy to afford right now. So now at this point, I'm like, wow, we had a horrible start. Like, are we doing this? Are we back? Are we back? Like, it's so over, but I think we're so back, right? It only took like 4 days and one kind of major mistake from our opponent, and we're kind of back in this thing. Like, I don't think there's any way that our opponent can stop this cap long term. Like, he can sacrifice an infantry to delay it maybe, and we're really strong over here. We're sending this medium tank, you know, over here. This is actually a really cool medium tank position. If for some reason Andy decides to like commit everything, like infantry here to see the mech, infantry here clears the infantry, and then the anti-air that we know was like here, right? I think it was here, what, doesn't matter. And if the anti-air comes in to clear our mech in the forest, well, then the medium tank is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to counterattack the anti-air. So, alternatively, if it's like, you know, recon, if the anti-air comes to this square, then we've got the tank. So, like, this is the defensive advantage of this map, right? Like, we've got this position, and even though our opponent has like a bunch of vehicles over there, like there's no way we're in any danger. Any sort of attack into our control over those mountains is going to get repulsed with really devastating effects. So that's good for us. And now we need anti-airs because we see nothing in the center, and we see stuff on the side. And also, I'm kind of thinking that this was a bait, and that maybe there was a copter made from this airport, because I saw like these infantry like all retreated, and it's kind of like, oh, please attack this infantry with the recon. So I'm kind of thinking that maybe he was hoping that I would put the recon on the city and then get hit by a copter or something like that. So anyway, anti-air are very good on this map. Even if there's no air, the anti-air will have utility as Lash by being able to clear stuff like off cities or off mountains or off plains. It's going to be a good unit to have on both sides, and there's likely going to be copters eventually by Andy, because that's what Andy wants to build, right? Like copters are what gives Andy value when the hyper repair comes around. So we're good on tanks. Like we can deal with tanks very easily. We've got mechs, we've got one tank, we got an artillery, we've got a medium tank. Like we are not scared of tanks at all. We just need things. We just need to make sure that we're safe against copters. So double anti-air mech. Again, getting a lot of value out of this T-copter, even though it didn't get us a lot of value in the early game, allowing us to just get a lot of things that shoot vehicles onto the board. We see an infantry kind of suicide itself to delay that cap turn. We see all the infantry come back. So it's kind of funny, right? Like it seems like this was really a bait, because like you move back, but then you just move back again. So it's like, are you weak there or are you not weak there? And yeah, it moves back, so that's fine. And it's very hard on this map to do like kind of secret plays because the mountains are so far forward. You see so much of the contested area of the map. And we see the mech come out of the woods there. So that's really interesting. So we know that there was a mech there, confirmed, which is what we expected anyway. And then we see it leave. So now the mech's going to be down here. And that's great for us. That's like the best thing that could possibly happen for us, because there is no way in a million years that we are ever going to be fighting down here. Not a chance. We are absolutely, we're going to own the middle. We're not attacking here. Not a chance. So a mech being here can just have his vacation in the forest, and we will go elsewhere. We see the Recon run away. Okay. So all of a sudden, we're finally going to get this city, and now we can continue the pressure on this center city. But I'm not content with just one center city. I need to eat the entire center, because I'm really strong here, and it is time to take things over. So earlier on, we're pretty sure that our opponent got vision of our base, but now we've got 3 recons and an artillery in the center. This guy is not safe because I am Lash and I get bonus damage on planes. And we saw the mech leave as well. So now, what on earth? So now, first of all, Turnabout is fair play, right? Like I see the artillery, so that's fun. Secondly, what in the world is this anti-air doing here? And why is it here? It's such a strange thing. Now here's a mega pro tip. Okay, this is even stranger than you realize, and this is something I picked up on. I didn't really know what to make of it, but I just picked up on it. And I don't know. I'll let you analyze it with me. You can see if you find something clever to conclude from this. When do you think this anti-air was built? Now, the natural assumption would be it was built from here last turn, or the previous turn, right? And then this is its first move to here, right? Because it's six squares away. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? That's what you'd assume. And then maybe Andy is just going to be shifting everything towards here. Seeing that, I mean, it does kind of make sense, because I do have like all my stuff kind of in this area. So it makes sense to like kind of be shifting everything towards here to avoid getting overrun. But wait, there's something strange here. If you look in the bottom, oh, you can't actually see it. I'm sorry, I'm hiding things from you. How am I going to do this? Here, 1 second. Okay, I had the little tooltip off the side of the map. So if you look in the bottom left corner, you will see that the fuel on this anti-air is 48. It's very interesting because if you look at my anti-airs that were just made last turn, they start with 60 fuel. Well, if this anti-air was made last turn from this base like I expected, it should have 54 fuel. But it doesn't, it has 48 fuel. I don't really know what this means, but I'm very confused. And I kind of think my opponent is throwing. That is my conclusion from this information. I think my opponent is throwing. This makes no sense. It's not good that this anti-air is here. Why is it one move away from a base when it's used 2 turns worth of fuel? I don't have answers, but we're so back. We're so back. I had made 100% peace with the fact that I was going to lose this game. And we're so back now. So anyway, so that's a very interesting piece of information. Sometimes the fuel can tell you interesting stories. It's something I've been trying to incorporate into my game lately to try and squeeze every morsel of information about the map that I can. And that was kind of, I mean, I don't know if it helped me necessarily in this game, but it is relevant. And so we're going for the most aggressive thing possible. So first of all, we cleared out this infantry here. We know because this mech left, all these guys are completely safe. The worst thing that could possibly happen is like a tank pops up and kills this guy. But even if that happens, I don't know if we care. So anyway, we're going to continue our infestation of the center. I'm not content to merely get this property. I also need to prepare to get this property as well. We're going to flip the entire center. And so we know that there can be no harass on this city. So there's no reason for us to like continue capping with the 6 HP guy. The 6 HP guy can just block, because we need the 6 HP guy to probably block these squares for next turn when we get to this city. So we can just switch the infantry that we are capping here with basically no downside. And now that we control like all this forest, there's no world that we're ever getting flushed out of here. It cannot happen. We've got all of our stuff supporting this area. There's no way that our opponent can ever be strong enough to get us out of here. We're going to get both of the center cities, like almost certainly. And now we've got this artillery. Look how far forward this artillery is, but he's completely safe. There's absolutely no way that anything has a chance of hitting this artillery, because you need to have control over both of these squares. And if you get control over this square, you need to have control over both of these squares. You need a lot of units for that to happen. And we see there's no units down here. So we're totally safe. We can be really aggressive with our positioning. Oh, and by the way, yeah, we've got another mech in there. So the forest infestation is very, very real. It doesn't look like our opponent is going to attack into our kind of bait there, so that's fine. So we're just going to consolidate this, and we're just going to exert a ton of pressure in this center of the map, because all of our stuff is here, and we're going to make sure that we get those 2 center cities. We do need to at least pay attention over here. We're so strong here that we're actually, like, we see artillery is not going to be the threat for a while. Anti-air, I mean, God knows what he's doing. There's another anti-air back here, and a recon. We don't actually need anything else over here to be strong. The only way that things could go pretty bad for us is on this side here, because we know that our opponent has like 4 infantry over here, so they're pretty strong potentially. And if they push up this way, then that could be like one counterplay that could put us in danger. So we want to set up a defensive position, and having an artillery here is ridiculous. You put the artillery here on this road. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. Well, I'm drawing really badly, but anyway, this square is 2 artillery moves from the base, and it covers both of these cities. And as soon as that artillery is set up there, neither of these 2 cities become attackable at all. So once again, this map favors defensive play. There are so many good places to set up defenses on this map because of all the terrain. And now that we've won the center, we are going to have the luxury of playing defensively on other parts of the map and using that terrain to our advantage. And we just set up the tank here. If this recon sticks around, we'll pop it, but we're not going to give our opponent free information about the tank. And we're going to retreat this guy. There's a lot of infantry here, and we are not actually prepared to fight. And if a tank shows up like on this city and hits the infantry, then I'm just going to lose the guy on the mountain for free. So I would much rather be prepared to counterattack any sort of counterattack any capture attempt on the city, because we saw the infantry go into this forest, so we know that he can come up here and try to put pressure on the city next turn. So we're just going to try and be in position to stall any sort of attack on that side as long as possible by retreating. And we only need to stall until the artillery shows up, and then we'll be fine. And we see a copter show up. Wow. I feel really good about this anti-air that is 6 moves away from this copter. Feels good, man. And we do see that infantry does come aggressively. So this is a very, very YOLO attack from Andy. And now the anti-air goes back this way. So I have no idea what the plan is. Like, I thought he was going to be sending him this way, and now he's going back this way. So I think my opponent is just tilted. That's the most likely explanation. Oh, I totally forgot to mention this. I put this guy here. This is like the last move I did. I put this guy here on purpose because I know that very likely my opponent has an infantry on this mountain. And so if I put the infantry here, my opponent might think that I'm making a play for these cities. And if I'm making a play for those cities, a very good way to defend against that is to put the artillery here. But actually, I know that there's no way I can ever do that. I just want the artillery to stay far back. And if it's here, it's never going to threaten my captures of the center. Not that I think you could anyway, but by putting this infantry here, I am making it more likely that this artillery kind of stays farther back than it could be, because it would be more useful in other positions. Anyway, enough about that. That was kind of a deliberate bait. Not a bait, I don't know if it's bait, but anyway, trying to control the game. And seeing this infantry move back, we know exactly that that's what happened, right? Like, artillery's here, and then this infantry is blocking for the artillery, which is totally fine. I'm never ever attacking here anyway. I want to attack here once I've captured the middle anyway. So, like, obviously there's no way I can ever clear that artillery off because it's so far back. So I'm never going to actually try. But it is nice that all those infantry are staying really far back. And we see his base. Andy still making infantry from the center. So shoes on the other foot now. I didn't have center control. Now I've got center control. And I see a ton of stuff. And I've got a lot of pressure. This is... It's crazy to say. But now, like, I feel like the game is over. It's over the other way. Like if you had told me 5 turns ago that this game would be over by day 12, well, I definitely would have believed it. But if you had told me that this game would be over by day 12 and that I would be winning, I probably would not have believed it. But nonetheless, here we are, day 12, and like this is it's game. Like it's basically over. Like this copter's gonna die. So first of all, I've equalized income, right? Like I've got the center city, so now we're on even income, so that's good. We're not gonna lose this city. Lash on mountains, damage bonus. I can contest this capture with just infantry, no problem. A lot of stuff over here, which is fine, because I only need to delay. All I need to do is get the artillery here, and we can play really far back and still not be under threat. Infantry moves back. Goodbye, copter. Even if the anti-air gets murdered by a mech or by even if the anti-air gets murdered by a mech or by tanks or whatever, or the anti-air did its job. It got value. And we're actually going to go in on this recon here. This recon was very obviously bait because it's very deliberately placed so that this airport can reinforce with one copter move to this tank. But I don't care that it's bait because I have all my stuff here. Look at all this stuff. And I've got this anti-air as well. Like this turn is gorgeous. Just watch this. So we shift some guys over because we need a little bit more to just stall this out. Anti-air covers the tank. You're baiting me? No, I'm baiting you. Mech covers the infantry. Medium tank in the forest also covers the tank. Mech covers the mech. Infantry helping support the capture here. Artillery supporting everything. Mechs also supporting the artillery. Everything is supporting everything. Like this is... Sorry, I'm praising myself more than I should, but I love this turn. Everything about this turn is lovely. It's so beautiful. All the synergy is just out of the world. And we force the artillery back here. How is this artillery ever going to support or is ever going to help defend against the comm tower cap? It can't. It's too far back. And it's too late. Even if the artillery like comes here, like it's not really helping. I'm already in position. T-copter blocks access to the artillery from the other side. Recon blocks access this way. Like nothing can attack this at all. There is no way that anything can attack this. You attack the tank, you get hit by the medium tank and the anti-air. You attack the infantry, you get hit by like a bazillion things. But you have to attack because I'm capping the comm tower. So it's a no-win scenario for Andy. And I know, because of my crazy center vision, that there can be absolutely nothing that can test this cap. So I don't need to keep my stuff over here to defend against an attack that's never coming. So instead, I just shift all my recons to where the fight's actually happening. Instead of like leaving them in the woods. Like the infestation, it did its job already. They can move on to other places now. And so I'm anticipating losing my anti-air. So I need to get another one just to make sure that we can't get like copter pushed out of this side. But I mean, I think it doesn't really matter at this point anyway. But I'm just making sure that I don't get overrun here. So that is the benefit of this airport. Like if we need to shift all of our income to one side, we can do it very quickly with that extra airport because you just start building copters out of the side that you need more control over. And again, this is kind of beautiful. Tank now in range of the recon. It gets capped again. So obviously, like, the majority of stuff is over here, right? You can just tell by the amount of infantry over there. Copter goes in. Well, that's good for me. Oh, a tank shows up. Also good for me. Infantry sacrifices itself. And we see a recon made from the center. And this is so funny because I got this mountain. Now I can just see what comes out of this base forever. So like the center control is so crazy on this map. Like if you were able to get this level of center control that I've managed to accomplish, it is just like, what can you do? It's so hard to get back. And now this turn is just going to be brutal. Goodbye, copter. We just go in to see what's happening. We don't care. Like, this recon dies, doesn't matter. Trade out the recon. Get to kill the cap. It's so fun. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right. So this anti-air doesn't cover. It can't reach the copter unless there's superpower, which actually Andy is going to have charge for likely this turn because Andy has taken so much damage that it's almost online. But I mean, this position for the forces that have kind of cobbled together here, this is a really good defensive position for me. And really, all I need to do is kind of survive until that artillery's there. And now the artillery's there and it's covering all my vehicles. So yeah, like this mech's here, but who cares? This mech's here, but who cares? There's not enough pressure here to wipe everything out. And if that's the case, then I'm just going to be able to spam vehicles out of this base and air out of this base to just stabilize this. And eventually this push will run out of steam. Because this is a weak side push. Right, so now like this is all attacking into my strong side basically. So it's really difficult to make this work unless there's like a really decisive engagement at the beginning, and it's not decisive enough. And then on the other side, well, you want to see decisive engagements. A little bit unlucky to lose that roll. I don't know exactly what the roll was, but we can just kind of clear everything off. Got the mech on the city, or on the comm tower, capping that, but also supporting the medium tank and the artillery. I don't even need to defend the artillery anymore. Like if anything dares attack this artillery, like look at all this stuff that will just smash it. I put the copter here because if there's any way to interrupt this cap, it would be like an infantry here. And so naturally the infantry would kind of come this way. So now this is blocked. And there's a good chance that the artillery that was here previously is probably like here or maybe here. So by putting the T-copter there, we block ways to save the comm tower and also don't put anything in artillery range. And we just leave this forest open. And if our opponent wants to find out if it's empty or not, then they can put a unit in artillery range. And now we can we got the center, so we got income advantage. So now we just we spam vehicles this way, and I mean we won so hard over here. Like we're gonna end up winning on both sides, and this is just instant resign. So what a game! Very game played, very bizarre. One of the weirdest games I've played in a long time. Really thought I was going to lose. Really ought to have lost. Boy, the opener was really horrible. Can't believe how fast it turned around. Like how kind of relatively easily I won the center control, and how just everything fell apart so quickly after that. It was really kind of shocking, the way everything turned out. But I just think center control on this map is just so good, and my opponent kind of got spread out a little bit, and then sometimes you got to make a strong all-in play towards something and just go for it. And I feel like, that was my best play in the situation, or in the scenario that I was in, based on that really bad opening. And I put the pressure on my opponent to kind of counter that, and I forced some mistakes, and then things just got really out of control really, really quick. So let's take a look at this with full vision. Maybe we can learn some stuff. So we see the day three recon, day 4 recon, and so this guy is skipping this property. And actually, this is kind of weird. This guy came up to here, I think, to take advantage of this chain, but it leaves this airport uncapped for a long time. It's kind of awkward to like go back and get the airport, but and then these guys all leave these caps, so it is a little bit uneconomical for my opponent. And also it delays like these caps, right? So he's like a full city behind back here. So I did know at the time, like, because of the way that those infantry got pulled off to help with the fighting, I knew that my income, like, I wasn't going to be in like a big income hole right away because my capture phase was very efficient. I just knew that if I lost the center and then the center stayed lost for a long time, that's when, like, I could be down 2K for the rest of the game from there. But there was a period of time where I wasn't behind yet, and I had to make something happen before that changed. So you can see, as we expected, Recon ends up being here, so sees everything that we're doing, and then we lose center here. So this is the old aggro greed from Andy. It's an Elagatua classic, so respect for that. I do like the idea of the T-copter on this map because you get the value out of the mechs. Early anti-air here, a little more questionable. I really think that there needed to be maybe like a tank from here probably. Or even, I think this mech is maybe one turn too early. I think this needs to be a tank. Well, I think a 1,000,000% this needs to be like a tank here. What was the income like this turn? We got 14K? Yeah, I mean, I think if I'm playing this turn, I think it's just got to be like tank and artillery from these two bases, tank, artillery, infantry, something like that. Because you want the mech next turn, you don't want the mech this turn. So I think that's really where it started to go wrong, because you know that you're going to get the center, and so the best way to make the center work for you is just to get artillery, like, back here, or in these woods, like artillery here, artillery here. Once you're there, it's very difficult to have anything bad happen to you. So this was the turn, I think, where things really started to go badly, just based on the deploys. But yeah, this anti-air, like, I talked with my opponent after the game a little bit. I think he mentioned that he thought that I was saving for copters, which is another kind of desperation play that you can go. It's just not the one I chose, and desperation copters don't really synergize with my CO either. So it's just it's not what I went for. So yeah, so it's anti-air and then another anti-air here. So this is like really kind of strange deploys to go double anti-air, thinking like I'm spamming copters from this base or something like that. And I guess for what it's worth, this is like pretty good vision control by me up to this point, because I showed the recon from here and I show the mech from here, but that is a lot of missing income on the map that could potentially be copters. So I do think that my opponent was kind of tunneling on the possibility of copters, maybe needlessly, but I also allowed that possibility to exist by concealing some of my vehicles and by not giving away the existence of these two recons for another like turn or two. And by that time, the commitment to anti-air is like really, really strong. And so this guy goes here, and then he goes back here to like shift over to the other side, because I think now, all right, so I kind of get it now. So I thought that this anti-air was coming from this side going here, but actually the anti-air was coming this side and then going here. So that, and it makes sense because I think at this point, my opponent knows like, okay, I'm losing the center, but I've got a whole ton of crap over here. And so my push direction is actually this way. So I need an anti-air over here to defend against copters from this airport. But it's the way it ends up playing out is just super awkward. And this guy is like running around the back lines forever instead of helping the fight. And so now the center is lost. Now it's like really, really, really kind of a dire situation because this attack is just very slow to develop. You're attacking with like mechs and with infantry, and so all the vehicles are like really, really late to the fight. And so even though, I mean, I've got like this ragtag squad defending against the push, it's actually a hard counter to what's pushing into me. And so from there, like once that copter dies, like it's kind of it's kind of over a little bit, because it's one of those, I'm committing my copter to this. I sure hope you don't have an anti-air or I lose. That's kind of the attack. And I had an anti-air and he lost, so that's that. And from there, I mean, we trade on the side here, and then we have the really decisive attack here. And you can see that even with a hyper repair, even if I lose like the majority of this stuff, which I could lose the majority of this stuff, but just the flow of reinforcements for me, all these guys, I don't really think there's much risk of Andy being able to make a foothold strong enough to be able to actually get this city. It's pretty unlikely. And conversely, my control over this bottom corner is absolutely rock solid, and I'm actually the one who's likely to flip this city with this infantry, and this comm tower is likely to get flipped as well. So it really was totally done by day 13. But yeah, what a game, what a wild turnaround. So this is going to put me into the finals of Smacky Cup 4, which is only a 4-person finals. It's pretty exciting. This is the farthest I've been in a tournament. I've got another tournament. I'm in Smacky Cup 3 as well. With the finals just started with that, and so I'm in the quarterfinals for that. So if I, even if I win that quarterfinal, I will still be kind of equal to where I've made it in this tournament. So I'm really excited to have made it this far, and hopefully I'll go all the way. Right? It's I've put a lot of thought into having good games and putting my best foot forward in all these tournament games to see if I can go the distance. So we'll see if I can make that happen. But obviously, there's a lot of good players still left that will be meeting me in the finals eventually. Although I am the first person to finish their bracket, so I don't think there's going to be any action in Smacky Cup 4 for realistically a couple of months. I think is what it's going to take for the rest of the bracket matches to wrap up. So anyway, that's going to do it for me in this one. I hope you enjoyed this replay and this kind of very bizarre game that swung left, right, and upside down in a hurry. And I'm sure I'll be back with the Smacky Cup 3 finals, quarterfinals. Once that game concludes, that game is pretty well in progress, although at the time of recording this, it is really anybody's game, and kind of a weird one. Will make for a very interesting video, no matter how it turns out, that's for sure. Yeah, I think that's all I got to say. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.